Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Aux Fiends in our newest episode. This is Rishabh, as always, joined by my co-host Mateo. Mateo, how are you doing?
Good, I'm doing good. It's been a long time, Rishabh, but
Long time no see.
okay. Long
Keeping up
time
our
no see.
consistent Aux Fiends upload schedule, as
Yes,
always.
it's the consistency of being inconsistent.
Hey,
That's what
man,
that is.
as long as we're keeping something consistent, I'm good with that.
I guess
Um,
so.
but how you been, Mateo? You excited for another episode of Aux Fiends today?
I'm excited. I'm excited. I mean, no, all jokes aside, it has been a while since we've
Yeah,
recorded, so I'm definitely feel rusty. I had to brush up my ears, kind of do a little cleanse, get the
get back
Q-tips
into the
out.
groove.
You know?
Get back into the groove of things. No pun intended. This is a music podcast.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
just to give some context, so this podcast, we basically take turns reviewing albums. So one episode it'll be my pick, one episode will be Mateo's pick, and we basically go track by track and give our thoughts on each track, and then we do a full review of the album at the end. And Mateo, what we always like to say is that it would be great if our listeners could listen to the whole album once on their own end before visiting the episodes.
Definitely.
And
Yeah.
basically, this just helps make the episode more enriching.
Mhm. It definitely does. I think that's a big core component of kind of the podcast. At least to familiarize yourself with the music and the album, or at least a couple of the songs, because we do go track by track, and we'll say it out.
Absolutely.
So just so you know what we're actually talking about. But go ahead, Rashad.
So this is actually our 15th episode, Mateo. I just noticed that.
Whoa.
I know we hit a landmark today, which is crazy. But on the last episode, I got to review one of my favorite albums, Cinema by the Marias. So of course, it is Mateo's choice today. Mateo, without spending too much more time, I think we should get into it.
Yeah. As you guys probably already know from the title and the thumbnail, this episode, we're covering Selfish Machines by Pierce the Veil. Let me get into a little bit of the history of that. This album came out in 2010. To be clear, they did have a reissue of this album in 2013, and it had a bonus track as well called Kissing in Cars. We didn't listen to that one. We listened to the original, just to be clear.
Yep.
This was their second studio album. Their current members are Vic Fuentes, Tony Perry, and Jamie Preciado. And let me pull up what they actually, all of them do individually. Vic is the lead vocals. He does rhythm guitar, keyboards, piano. Tony is lead guitar. Jamie is bass and backing vocals and keyboards. And they all kind of have a juggling of kind of a bunch of different things they kind of do. Wear many different hats. I guess the best way to kind of describe Pierce the Veil as their genre is it's definitely a mixture of a lot of stuff. It's metalcore, emo, pop punk, post-hardcore, screamo. I think the best way to kind of describe their sound and their noise, even though many would say it's kind of derogatory, as mall emo. Think a la Fall Out Boy, My Chemical Romance, Panic! At the Disco. Vic has even kind of described the band as, quote, Mexicore, as all their songs kind of have this Latin influence, which I definitely see. This band's vibe is very much Hot Topic, Spencer's, Warped Tour. That's the best way to kind of sum it up. And so I'm definitely excited for this listen, because something we'll get into too is I'll even mention it once we get to every song. A lot of these, not to spoil it either, a lot of these songs I do have not necessarily on a daily listen, but I'd say once every 2-3 days, I'm at least listening to a couple Pierce the Veil songs. A couple from this album, and I'll bring them up later. But that's kind of history of this album. Rashab, I do want to know your thoughts before we get all into it. Have you heard of Pierce the Veil before? Were you familiar with any of these songs? Not even necessarily on the album. What were your thoughts kind of going into this?
Yeah, I think the answer across the board is no. I don't think I'd heard of them. When you said Pierce the Veil, I don't know if I really put two and two together. I don't think I'd heard of them. I vaguely remember on the last episode making like a connection to MCR, but maybe that was mostly because of stuff that you were bringing up
Mhm.
about the choice overall. So no, I had not heard of them, but I think the way you described them is, perfect. I think you nailed exactly what I think their sound is like in terms of emo rock, screamo influence. Definitely something that feels like a product of its time from 2010 and has got that hot topic Spencer style that's definitely all over my notes.
Yeah.
Yep, I think you captured it well. But no, I hadn't heard of them. But I did want to throw the question back to you and just quickly get your thoughts on how you came across them, and was it something you were listening to in 2010 or is it more of a recent discovery?
You know what? Thank you actually for asking that, because I don't want to come out as a poser. I honestly didn't grow up listening to Pierce the Veil at all. This was something more probably 2017, 18 that I had actually started listening to. Definitely not in 2010. I had definitely listened to some emo stuff back then, but that wasn't super my jam back in 2010, or even kind of those early 2010 years, you know. But I
Yeah.
definitely been familiar with that sort of space, like I had mentioned, Warp Tour and stuff like that. And I'd come across them, honestly, I think just from a friend who had put them on. I was like, wait, it wasn't for the first time I'm hearing it in 2017 or something,
Okay.
but I had heard
Yeah.
them, and it's like that's when it actually kind of hit for me. It's like, okay, I'm gonna actually, you know, take a choice and listen to more of their stuff, and that's definitely
Got
how
it.
I'd come across kind of them and been more familiar with them. But they've definitely been, anytime I'm listening to kind of the 2000s, 2010s, this kind of vibe of music, Pierce the Veil's on, and many of
Yeah.
these songs are on,
Yep.
from this
Yep.
album. Yeah, I won't lie.
Cool. Makes sense.
Yeah, I
All
think,
right.
unless you have anything else to say, Rishabh, I think we can get right into the first track.
Yeah.
Yeah, sound
Yep.
good?
Yep. Sounds good to me.
If you don't mind, I'll take it, but I have just quick things to say about the first track, Besitos. Um, and then I'll pass it off to you. But Rashab, they get right into it. Get the guitars there, the vocals are there. You can't hide from it. Come on, man. It's Pierce the Veil. That's literally all I have to say. I'm so interested in just hearing a glimpse of your thoughts of what like just what you thought, because I just can't imagine you listening to this type of music at all. So Rashab, what did you think of Besitos? What did you
So
think?
Besitos is the first track on this album, and I think it's from the beginning, from the very first track. I think Pierce the Veil pretty much sets the vibe of what most of the album will sound like, which is this kind of screamo, hot topic type of music. At the beginning, at least the first track, it almost reminded me a little bit of a ska influence, but I'm not gonna take that too far. I think that kind of dies out at some point as well. But overall, I think it, and this is I feel bad for saying this again and again because I feel like we say it in every single album review. I'll admit that, but I do think this first album just sets the vibe of what you're going to hear for the rest of the album. For the most part, there are some tracks that veer off into slightly different spaces, but overall, I feel the album is, very coherent in its tone and its vibe, and I think this track sets it up well. Um, I think the singing was pretty energetic, good musicianship overall. But I'll keep it at that because I think as we get through each track, you'll start understanding where I'm coming from on this album. And I'll be curious to hear your thoughts too, Mateo. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the first track here, but
Yeah,
sets the vibe for sure.
I I think you said it pretty well, and yeah, I feel like we say it a lot. It
Mm-hmm.
definitely sets the vibe. It really sets the tone for kind of the rest of the album. And this
Right.
is one Besitos is one of the tracks that I have on my playlist. So I
Okay.
really do love this song. Not my favorite, but
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those that this was not new to me at all. I listened to this hundreds of times. It's there, sets the tone. I'm ready. You know, And I think that we can go on to the second track, which is Southern Constellations.
Interesting one. Yeah.
Yeah. Rishabh, what did you think of this one?
Well, I think without a doubt it's the interlude, Mateo, in a sense that it's not in the middle of the album for sure, obviously, but it is a 1 minute track. It's the shortest track on the album. Simpler singing, a little bit more acoustic, and really just a track like tracking. I don't know what the term is, but it basically is a tracking track into the next track. In my opinion, kind of a transition song that's there to kind of bridge between Besitos and the third song, which is The Boy Who Could Fly. It's not exactly like I wouldn't say Southern Constellations ends where the third track starts necessarily, but the sound is similar enough where it kind of feels a little bit seamless. So yeah, not much more to add. I think it's kind of a transition track and slightly less screamo maybe, but yes, a transition track nonetheless.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head for me. I had the same thought, like interlude, but it's not in the middle. I wouldn't call this an interlude. It's definitely the closest thing there is to one, I guess, but it's 100% transition song though. You are right. It doesn't match up perfectly, or at least I don't think so. Mm-hmm. But maybe tonally, I feel like it does because it's kind of the slower. It's more. Not breezy. Breezy is not the right word, but it's definitely it's a huge change up from Besitos to then their Southern Constellations, and then it kind of amps up right at the end of Southern Constellations to then leads us right into The Boy Who Flies. That's why it's definitely just the transition song. I do want to point out the line, but I'll never let you freeze without me. The way Vic vocally just kind of sung that was super beautiful to me. I just wanted to put that out there. I did love that part. But that's kind of all I have to say about this track.
Yeah, this is definitely the shortest one. Again, transition track for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of shortest one, the next track, "The Boy Who Could Fly," is the longest track, a little over 5 minutes. Right. We are so back, Rishabh. Crazy energy. This is another one that I listen to on repeat. I love The Boy Who Could Fly. There was like a dip kind of in the middle-ish of the track. Not a bad dip, I want to clarify that. But to having more kind of singing. Maybe you almost call it singmo instead of screamo. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like that term. But then it bounces back later again. Kind of have that more screamy-ish part of it. Yeah. And then kind of the last minute or so, I'd say, was just kind of instrumental. I think it was that kind of needed break, especially just going from kind of the way they hit the beats, at least so far, if you're listening to this as an album, right? There's the Besitos would have had all the energy, then it died down again with Southern Constellation. So the very end where it amped up again with The Boy Who Could Fly. And then right at the end, it kind of had that little Southern Constellations part where it's just more, a breather. It was really just a breather right at the end of The Boy Who Could Fly. And it works for me. Works. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot more of that emo rock sound. You hear shreddy guitar, fast drumming. There's kind of a section that's a little bit more interesting sonically. Like it's kind of like a surreal musical dissonance kind of that happens, I think, close to the end of the track. But overall, I mean, and this is I kind of struggled to review this album on a track by track basis because I felt the tracks all bled into each other quite a bit for me. And just to set the tone of my opinion on this album overall, it's like, I definitely appreciate everything Pierce the Veil is doing. I get their genre, I get their space. Personally, Mateo, you were right. I don't think I would not individually listen to these songs the way you do, but I totally respect the fact that you do. I think these songs are well put together. I think I would enjoy this album in the right atmosphere, and some of these songs in the right atmosphere if the vibe was correct for this kind of sound, like kind of a nostalgic sound, right? In terms you think about like music you hear in Hot Topic or at Spencer's, and it reminds me of the type of music that was really quite popular from 2007 to 2010 in terms of this screamo sound, in terms of My Chemical Romance being around. I can literally feel the iPod Touch in my hands when I listen to the album, which I totally love about it. Would I listen to these tracks individually? I don't think so. I mean, there are some tracks I like more than others, but
Okay.
that's kind of, I mean, just to give a little bit of an idea.
Yeah, a
of
little
how
taste of your overall album review.
little
Or,
taste, yeah. And
Okay.
for me, for that reason, I think it was a little bit more challenging than usual to like review the tracks individually. That being said,
Yeah.
I think this is again a solid screamo track. It exists within that space fully and occupies it. I think they make a good use of the composition that they've created here.
Yeah.
They're using the guitar in the right places. They're using the drums in the right places. For me, it's just that there's this constant uniformity in this album where the differentiation of each track just doesn't stand out to me or pop out to me as much. But it's a solid work, I would say. I can understand definitely if you're a fan of this musical space, this is easily something you could put on repeat. So totally get it.
Yeah. I think it's very fair. There are some parts where I don't agree with you, but I think what you're saying about is very fair. And I'll save a lot of what I had to say for kind of my overall thoughts on the album later. But I do agree, because I did come to the same kind of point where it's like I can see how there's not a ton of individuality in some of these tracks. But I'll save a lot of those kind of thoughts for later.
Yeah.
But I do want to say, because you had mentioned screamo, and even I had mentioned screamo, but at the purest form, I don't think any of these songs are just screamo. That's really why I came to the point as well of like mall emo kinda, where it has screamo vibes, but all of them are like palatable to the everyday listener, definitely. If that makes sense. It's not screamo. It's not screaming front to back.
No, not at all.
I do want to make that clear. It's just signs of screamo, because there is screaming.
Yes, and I think in fact, if you put these genres on a spectrum, right, then I would say this album exists between pop punk and emo rock somewhere. Screamo, there are elements of that. Like I even mentioned ska earlier. Like I hear some of that as well. You'll hear talking about individuality. I think when you get into the back half of this album, there are sonically things that start to diverge. So, but overall, I would say like it's still somewhere between emo rock and pop punk. Definitely, I think the word palatable is correct. Like it's something that a mainstream listener would have no problem listening to. I think we're used to this type of sound.
Fair. I think that leads us to the next track, the fourth track, Caraphernalia. I'll start on this one. I think this is the first time, I could be wrong, that I feel like that we really hear actual, like, more guttural kind of screams.
Yes, that's so funny you say that, because it's exactly what I wrote down in my notes. It's actually funny.
Okay. Yes. I don't think I'm wrong on that then. Yeah, I think we're right. But I like it though. This is another track, Caraphernalia. This is on my playlist. I listen to this a lot. Vic's vocal range is insane on this track. I mean, come on. I don't know if you agree. Whether you agree or not that you like it, you got to admit it's insane the way he can just move his voice. The way in this track where like it's the bridge screamo to kind of singing, it's almost like a lullaby to me. I don't know. It works. I love Caraphernalia. Rishabh, what do you think about it?
I don't see any of the things you're saying, but I'm not going to combat against them, because it's kind of like I don't even disagree. I don't even agree. I'm quite just like, I just don't see it at all. Like, and I don't feel like this is going to sound bad, but I don't feel like I have a passionate opinion to disagree against what you're saying, I guess. But that being said, I did enjoy this song, to be honest. I had it almost tagged as my favorite when I was listening to it. I like how it's funny that you were saying guttural scream, like exact words I used on my notes. They introduce a little bit more of that. At the same time, it's funny because they also I think this track's kind of a turning point. You start hearing a little bit more of an emotive kind of singing as well here.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll start, in my opinion, you start seeing that in the next few tracks as well.
Yeah.
But you know, it still is very well situated in the emo rock, pop punk, whatever you want to call it, on that spectrum, that space. I think this song still sits very well there, and it's almost like a very. It's the type of song that I could almost use to like point to that specific musical genre and be like, oh, this is what I'm talking about. That 2000s Y2K
Yeah.
up to 2010 iPod Touch, screamo
Yeah.
slash pop punk music.
Yeah.
I'd be like, this right here is what I'm talking about. So it's
Yeah.
very in its place and indicative of its genre. So I liked it. I think it would again it's bleeding into my album review, but this type of music, I think, especially these songs, I think within the right context, I think I could appreciate that.
I think a lot of that is fair, especially I want to highlight that kind of part where you were saying like if you, this track just makes you think of that kind of time, which makes sense because honestly, Paraphernalia is like their like third probably most popular song, so
Got
it
it.
was definitely been on around then. I think the first two maybe kind of really most popular songs aren't actually even on this album. It would be like King for a Day and A Match in the Water, which are also both very good songs. But definitely Paraphernalia and probably a later song later on, Bulletproof Love. I think those are definitely the most popular of all the Pierce songs. I could be wrong, but I think it's fair to say these kind of ones.
Okay.
Again though, I can respect where you don't, where you're not passionate enough to kind of go against with what I said because I
Yeah.
do absolutely see what you're saying. Like I have to put my headspace when listening to all this into like maybe like yours or someone else's who has
Right.
never heard any Pierce the Veil songs where I'm like,
Right.
okay, yeah. The reason I know like this track and I can kind of differentiate it is because I've heard it a
Right.
hundred
Heard it so
times.
many
You
times.
know?
Totally get it. Yeah. Mhm.
But even then I myself had came to the same conclusion like, oh, there is not a ton of individuality in some of
Mhm.
these like tracks. Like if you just put someone who had never listened, like what's the difference between this one and the one before?
Right.
They wouldn't probably remember like, oh, this is Paraphernalia, this is the boy who could fly. I
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
love them, but
Yeah.
I can understand and respect uh your lack of passion, I'd say.
I mean, I think it's kind of like a broader genre discussion. I think the contours of this genre are just like that. I mean, they're sort of these foundational elements of this musical genre that I think remain the same. And it's funny because I think even if you look at other bands, I'll throw out My Chemical Romance. That's the one I'm most familiar with. If you listen to some of their music and then you listen to some of this music, I think some of the foundational elements. I mean, that's what genre is overall. But what I'm saying is, the structure of the music tends to be very similar in this particular genre. I think it has certain elements, the style of singing that kind of remains consistent. I've never heard too many bands within this space that, experiment a lot. Maybe that's reductive and people who have like heard a lot more of this music would, think
Mm-hmm.
differently. But I think there are just some things uh, that I think just constantly repeat across this musical space. So for me, it's, I think it's like you hear fast drumming and the type of guitar music that's in this and the way that they're going to sing, it's going to stay kind of the same across. So that's just how I feel about it.
Fair. Fair. To throw a question back to you though, Rishabh, and not because this is not to take too long on it because we're still only on the fourth track, but
Yeah.
would you say like say Pierce the Veil and then like, for example like My Chemical Romance? Do you think they just have things and styles that kind of cross over, or do you think if someone put on a MCR song and a Pierce the Veil song, you wouldn't, and if you'd never heard the songs, you would never really like you wouldn't know who's playing, basically. Like, do you think it's that kind of mix up, or do you think it's just similar styles? Because I definitely I would agree if it I would disagree. Sorry, if it's that because I think something a lot of these bands of this time have is they do have certain things, kind of that angst and the way they use vocals and instruments in common. But I absolutely would say there's a huge individuality of just a band, the band as a whole, not even just the genre or album, and be able to differentiate that between another band of the time. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I mean, to answer your question, I feel I'm somewhere in between. I feel like there's some crossover, but I'll give the bands the benefit of the doubt because I think personally I have not listened enough to both bands, and that would be more of the reason that I wouldn't be able to identify one from the other. Personally, I think maybe if I listened more, I would be able to tell the difference. Having heard Pierce the Veil, I think if you were to put an MCR song on, I think I could gauge the difference. And I mean, the singing style is different enough, but I do think that, in my opinion, this kind of music has a very uniform kind of style to it, which I think, and it's not to knock the artists or their individuality. I just think that I almost feel that fans of this genre want to hear certain specific musical elements across the bands, and I think that's why that gets repeated so often. And as I was mentioning, like that's what genre is, but I think this specific subgenre, if you want to call it, there is a lot of crossover of elements, and the style of singing tends to be pretty much similar across the board. And that's not really a criticism, honestly. It's just the nature of how this music is.
Okay, I get what you're saying then. I think that's fair. But to add on to that, I think, at least for me, maybe is a little disagreements, maybe not. I think a big proponent of these bands, especially Pierce the Veil and others of this kind, is the vocals. The vocals carry, and that's really where I see the biggest difference. So I think everything else under that, I can agree there's crossover, and I think it's really interesting that you brought that up of like, oh, this is something maybe fans want to be hearing across a bunch of different bands of the time, so of the styles, the instrumentation, and the way things are like sung or screamed. I could actually agree on that, how there's similarity in that, but I think it really has the individuality with the vocals, and that's from the get-go is where I'd be able to tell the difference between the bands and like, okay, this is what's playing.
Got it. I mean, I trust your opinion on that more honestly than mine, because I feel I'm a little uninitiated. I know the general vibe of it. I just don't know the bands that individually yet. Like, if you were to tell me, can you name like 3 to 5 bands from this subgenre? I mean, I don't think I could, honestly. I think I would be able to tell you maybe 2 or 3, but that's about it. And mostly it would be because I recognize that this subgenre exists, but I just don't have the knowledge of what makes these bands different or which bands are there. So I guess that's where I land with it.
Fair. I think there's enough talking of just that. I think we should get onto the next track.
Right,
We're only on the 4th track. Fast Times at Claremont High. I'll get into this one. At least so far, this was the least metal track. I think this was actually the first time I'd ever heard this song.
Okay.
Overall, though, it was melodic, but it was working for me. I did add this to a playlist because this is something I do want to listen more, because I'm a little more iffy on it, but I think I'm leaning towards I do like it. So definitely need more of a listen. But overall, it worked. But it was definitely kind of different from what we've been hearing so far of their actual like tracks. But Rishabh, what did you think?
Yeah, I think starting from this track, you see Pierce the Veil go from more strictly emo rock to maybe slightly more pop punk, and even like almost in the ballad space. And we'll start seeing this in the next few tracks as well. And one thing I actually always appreciate about this subgenre of music, and especially I think Pierce the Veil are indicative of that, is I do enjoy the lyrics. Like, I think the lyrics are very poetic and well written and quite passionate. And I think, you start seeing that in the next 3 to 4 tracks. And this chunk of the next 3 to 4 tracks is probably my favorite pieces of the album, to be honest. That being said, Fast Times at Claremont High is maybe one of the weaker songs for me on this section. Not the worst, for sure. It was a little bit repetitive, but I did like the chorus. I thought it was pretty catchy. I think you're on to something when you say it's a bit more melodic. So yeah, I think it's all right. Yep.
Fair. Fair. Next track is the new national anthem.
Yep.
What the hell, Rishabh? Is this Fast and Furious? You get what I'm saying? Right at the beginning there. To be clear, I've never seen Fast and Furious, any of the movies, but this scene, the intro of this reminded me of those movies. Am I way off? I don't know.
I don't remember the intro that distinctly, but I'm just more confused by the title. Like I don't know what that means, but it's just kind of interesting.
It's provocative. I don't know, Rishabh. Means something.
Maybe.
I also don't get the correlation, honestly, with the title to the track, but
yeah, you know. This is an interesting title. I mean, it's just funny because like all the other tracks, the title makes sense, or it's part of the song. This one is, it was so out of nowhere. I just thought it was funny.
I don't know. Maybe
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rishabh. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, like it's funny that like actual song is actually really like the lyrics are really kind of sweet, and actually these 3 or 4 songs are like all kind of love ballads. I mean, the whole album is kind of based on love, and
the whole album is kind of like a breakup
album, exactly. But this one was particularly, I think, just kind of a very sweet song in a weird way. And sonically, it was quite different too. More sing-songy than screamo for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you felt this from this track, but it reminded me of Train. You know that band, Train?
Yeah.
Specifically the song 50 Ways to Say Goodbye, especially that kind of intro and a little bit after that. This is what this reminded me of.
Okay.
Maybe I'm way off base, but
no, I mean you might be onto something. I didn't make that connection personally, but it is a sing-songier kind of track. Yeah. So maybe, I mean, I think
a little
it's
more
not
popular.
Totally
Yes.
Yeah, I see it.
I definitely I ended up adding this to my playlist. I do want to hear this more, you know, so I end up having more thoughts about it. See, to make the kind of final decision, but like overall, I think I liked it. I liked it enough to add it. I do want to give the props though, dude. The guitar went way harder than it needed to on this track. I don't know if you remember it at all, but I think it did. There was like a part of it where I think it just went kind of crazy, and I loved it. You know?
Okay. I mean, this is going to sound dismissive, but this is going to sound very dismissive and disparaging. But the guitar almost entirely throughout the album sounded kind of similar to me. Like, obviously, this is like they've clearly got it way with the guitar. They know what they're doing. You know, but I was never impressed, but I totally get it. I mean, it's one of those things that I think they use the guitar throughout all of the songs in the way that the song needed, in the way that this type of music operates. So, I mean, fair is all I can say, you know.
Okay. Fair is all I can say.
But my tone might sound dismissive, honestly, Mateo, but I'm just genuinely very neutral. Like, that's all I can say.
I just don't have much to say against that. Because I get what you mean at the end of the day. Because I don't think any of these tracks actually have like a solo guitar where there's nothing else going on. So it's not like it was ever in the spotlight. It's just something I had picked up on. And even if you had asked me right now for the new national anthem, be like, oh, hum how the guitar went. I honestly couldn't. That was the first time I think I had really heard the song. I didn't have this on repeat. You know, but it was just something that stuck out to me that I had heard kind of in that background. I'm like, oh, I liked it. You know.
Yeah, that's fair.
But, moving on to Bulletproof Love.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just get a quick thing out there. Iconic, dude. Very iconic. Great drums.
Is this song iconic, really?
Bulletproof Love, yeah.
Okay.
It's either this one or Care for Nelia, which is like the most popular on this album.
Okay.
It definitely, I would say this is probably on definitely top 5 most popular Pierce the Veil songs. Had that back and forth kind of instruments, and somehow Vic also does that with his vocals too. Classic. If it wasn't obvious, this is one I have on my playlist. Listen to Bulletproof Love all the time. Rishabh, I hope you didn't hate it. or at least
No,
have something to say about it. What do you think?
no, I didn't hate it. I think again, this is part of that section of the songs I actually did like. So that being said, I don't have detailed thoughts on it. I
Mm-hmm.
think it was similar to the new national anthem in a sense. Like I thought the lyrics were very sweet and almost it had almost like an innocence to it. Just reminds me of like I don't know middle school, high school in some ways. Just the lyrics and the sound of it. It's very sweet and very passionate and it's very nice, but it's not distinct to me still, like
Mm-hmm.
none of these tracks are popping out for me, and it's not even like a big criticism. It's just I don't have much more to offer in terms of commentary. Sorry to disappoint Mateo.
It's okay. I can't force it, man. I can't force it. I don't know
I
if it's
know,
better or worse being neutral than hating it.
I know, I
'Cause I
know.
don't think you hated any of these.
No,
This
no,
one was clear. You've been pretty neutral, but you
yeah,
know
yeah.
that's
That's how I put
fair.
it.
That's fair for someone I think brand new to kind of this space.
Right.
That's the least I could ask, I guess.
Yeah,
You
I
know.
don't hate it. I definitely don't hate it for sure.
Um, next track, "Stay Away from My Friends." Uh, I think this is the most different.
Yeah.
Track. Little more boring. Not bad. Not bad. Uh,
Okay.
I do want to point out, and this will lead to a little other discussion. I didn't love I think it was the kick drum in the mix, maybe around halfway. It was somewhere in the song. I don't know if it was a kick drum either.
Okay. Okay.
I didn't really love how the song was mixed. That's something I had forgot to mention with the reissue 3 years later of Selfish Machines. They completely remixed all the tracks. I think I forgot to mention that. And and
Right.
so
Okay. So it seems
depending
like
on
yeah.
which one, I don't know if it's actually maybe even better on the newer one because fans,
Right.
I had looked it up. Fans are kind of divisive about which tracks they like from which version of it. Because honestly, for my playlist, I have a couple of these songs on the original, and then I have a couple from the reissue, and I didn't even realize there was a reissue the whole time. So I just had the thoughts, just that it was all just one coherent album, and so I just thought it was interesting that a lot of these have different mixes. But overall, to stay on this track, not be on the tangent, vocals carried per usual. This is, I think, one of the more weaker songs, though, at the end of the day, if I'm being honest. Rishabh, thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, this was actually my favorite track off the album.
Whoa!
So, but I will say, like, I can understand why you thought it was weaker. It's really the most different. It's more of an emotional ballad. I thought the piano chords on this were really nice, like the way they were composed, that whole tune. And it was like a theme throughout the song, which I like. I think that was the key part that I kind of made this my favorite. I would say it was between this and maybe new national anthem in terms of my favorite. But I went with this one, I guess, because yeah, I think this is probably the one I would be most likely to revisit individually, kind of. It's probably, and the reason I think Mateo, it's more separate from the emo rock, going almost into pop at this point. And I
Yeah.
totally get that's why you didn't like it. I know we have that genre divide between us, so it doesn't surprise me. But yeah, I'll
Yeah.
say it's my favorite. Why not? It
I do
was
think that's
different and unique.
interesting to highlight that your kind of more favorite ones are like, to me, I wouldn't call, when I think of Pierce the Veil, I wouldn't say the new national anthem or Stay Away from My Friends, right? I'm thinking more
Yeah,
towards
yeah.
Love, Don't Care If You're
Oh,
Contagious,
totally.
blah, blah,
Yeah,
things like that, King for a Day.
yeah. I
Like
get it. Yeah.
those are Pierce the Veil, like that's their sound, that's the
Yeah, and
noise
it's
they
funny,
make.
like it's funny because like again, Caraphernalia, that one is probably actually that was kind of almost also in the running for my favorite, and that's more of a traditional, I think, Pierce the Veil sound. It's
Yeah.
just that one is one that I like. It's almost like if I wanted to hear this specific, in its most traditional form, then I might go to that one. But it's not
Gotcha.
necessarily my favorite. If that makes sense.
Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
Fair. Anything else to say about Stay Away from My Friends? As is your
No,
favorite track?
I think it was my favorite out of all of them. I would say it's probably the one I just remembered the piano chords for, and I might revisit it. It was sonically pretty different. it starts off different, it catches your attention. So that's about it. Yeah.
Okay. I think that leads us to the next track. I don't care if you're contagious. Rishabh, go ahead. What do you think?
Well, I think this track brings us back to where we started. It's back to the emo rock space.
Yep.
I have almost no thoughts. Like, I honestly would say, if I'm being honest, like starting from this track, I kind of started checking out, and it's not necessarily because the music was like, it's not necessarily because the music was like bad. I would just say it was just. I think at this point I was like, okay, I got it. Like, I get what Pierce the Veil sound is. These next 4 tracks, like they're gonna repeat similar sound for me, and they did. I don't. It's gonna sound negative. It's just that I don't have much more to say. I think on this one especially, I think it's back to the more screamo sound, more rock. Lyrically, I think they're still sticking. They still stick with that heartbreak kind of theme. But yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. I mean, for the first part, I 100% agree. Because literally, what I wrote down is, "Dude, come on, we are so back." Like, but I'm glad. I love that we're back, though. This is the sound I love and like. I don't care if you're contagious. Constant on my playlist. This is definitely my favorite track. I love this song. The mix of Vix and like the female artist's vocals, I think, is immaculate. Best way to I kind of describe it in the weird ways I describe songs. It's like a give and take the way this song goes. Come on, Rishabh, are you even listening to these lyrics, dude? I'll kiss you even if you're dead, dude. This hits. This hits. For me, it hits. I get it. It doesn't hit for you the way it does for me.
Yeah, lyrically, I think these songs can either be like, I feel like the lyrics are either very hokey or they're very poetic, and it's sometimes somewhere in the middle. But overall, I appreciate the lyrics. I'd say, the lyrics in the emo rock music are, well, it's emo rock. It has emo in the name, right? So they are emotional.
Yeah.
And sentimental, I think, is the even better word for it. It's almost like it can err on being hokey, but it's not quite. It's like you still feel something.
Yeah,
so I get it. Yeah.
It's just, I mean, that's the time. It's just the.
Yeah,
it is what it is, Rishabh.
It is,
Yeah,
exactly. And I think that feeling of like the unrequited love and like I don't know, it brings. Yeah. I think it's kind of almost like middle school iPod touch.
I think you're saying that more derogatory than it needs to be.
No, not really. I think it's nostalgic in a sense.
It's teen angst. That's what it is.
Exactly. It's very. I think the music and emo rock. It's the emotions are very big, and sometimes it's cathartic to listen to that kind of music.
Yeah.
And I get it. I like it.
At least, yeah.
I appreciate it.
I can respect your opinion though on it, just because I know you, and this isn't. You are like the complete opposite of angst. If I'm being honest.
In case, for some reason, I don't know if it's weird that we bring this up now, 15 episodes in, but in case our listeners don't know, we do know each other personally outside of the podcast.
I guess have we not brought that up?
I don't think we have.
Oh, okay.
So it's probably a good time that we did.
Yeah, we've been, to cut the kind of to go behind the blinds. We've been friends for a while, or fiends, We'll keep it with the Aux Fiends, but we do know each other personally. Yeah, I guess that's funny. In the middle of our 15th episode, we reveal that. Okay.
I mean, partly I think the reason is because we figured half of our listeners already know us personally, so they might know that we know each other personally.
Yeah.
In case someone out there didn't know, that's why Mateo can quote. He knows me at my taste. So
yeah.
Just to veer off of it.
I think that's enough of I don't care if you're contagious though. Moving on after that, right before we even get into Disasterology though, the 10th track, to me that's kind of the beginning of the end. After I don't care if you're contagious, I think it leads more to a downhill for me, but I think you would maybe disagree. So you go first on this. What do you think of Disasterology?
No, I mean I don't disagree. I think it's. I
Okay.
think I was ready for the album to be done anyway. It sounds negative, but it was more just like I got the idea of the music, so I like Disasterology didn't add anything for me. It bled into the last track. And honestly, Mateo, if you don't mind, I'll jump to the next track as well, and then maybe you can pair your thoughts as well for these two. But I did want to just say that the next one after this, $1 Million Houses parentheses The Painter, was my least favorite. So I don't have anything to say about it except that I found it a little bit more annoying, and I just was ready for it to be done. But I'll
Okay.
let you now go
Yeah.
back from the top. Yeah.
Look, I can respect it. If this isn't your sound, so you don't have to have a ton of
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like these tracks as much. Honestly, Disasterology, and I'll bunch it up a little bit
Mhm.
with $1 Million Houses, parentheses, the Painter. These are definitely my like least favorite tracks. I'm kind of in between the two, but to stick on Disasterology, uh, it just lacked the punch I wanted / expected. So I think we dislike it, but for different reasons. You were over it. You were
Mhm.
just over the sound, but me, it just lacked what I was used to and
Yeah.
kind of wanted.
Yeah.
That's why I thought you were maybe going to disagree with me. It's like, oh, maybe because this is lacking the usual stuff I like, and since we were kind of mix match on the sounds we like, at least off this album,
Okay.
maybe you'll like it. But I can respect
Yeah.
that you were just over it.
Yeah, I
You
think I
know?
was tuned out. I mean, I
Yeah.
tuned out from the sound and overall just like I think I was done with the album. Again, sounds way more negative than it actually is. I think it was
Yeah.
just a matter of like, okay, got it, pierced the veil.
All right, but
Check
for
that
these,
box.
I'll go speed run then for
Yeah,
Disasterology
go
for the
for
rest
it.
of my thoughts. Intro had a mix of like Transformers and System of a Down, which was cool.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
um, this was the first time I was noticing that reverb on the vocals. I'm
Mhm.
sure there was some other sort of mix and kind of splash of stuff. We see it in $1 Million Houses of like kind of mixing on the vocals. I was kind of indifferent on the reverb in Disasterology. I thought the guitar did go hard though. Um, Definitely more forgettable. For $1 Million Houses, The Painter, Auto Tune, come on, felt out of place. Didn't like it. But then it got like it's weird because this is my least favorite track. But then it
Oh,
got
you're the
I
bell,
thought,
huh?
huh?
For
Say it again?
$1 Million Houses, you're
Yeah,
saying it's your least
I would
favorite?
say
Yeah,
this
that
is
was my
my
least
least
favorite.
favorite track. But
Yeah, we'll both
then I
agree.
thought it for just because of that auto tune, and then I thought it got super
Yeah.
good like around the middle. So it kind of got back to what I like about Pierce the Veil. But then I kind of went back to not the auto tune, but it just like it meandered on, and I thought it could have been shorter. Instead of I think it's a
Mhm.
4 minute track, it should have been 2.5 to 3 minutes. Least favorite. I don't think I'll go back to it unless maybe I just want to listen to that kind of middle part that I did like.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
these two were definitely the downhill of the album. But I think that leads us to the last track, "The Sky Under the Sea." Rishabh, did it pick up for you at all, or you were just completely
Uh,
checked?
no, I think I was checked out, and I almost considered this one to be my worst, but it was more just like I think $1 Million Houses. Vocally, I found that more almost irritating. This one was just kind of I don't know, more emo rock noise for me. Like just didn't add anything. Although I will say you hear the name of the album during this track. That's something just lyrically I
But you
noticed.
do? Oh, I didn't even
Yeah, you do. You do.
recall that.
I think you
Oh,
do. We can cross check that. But as far as unless I was spiraling and was hearing things, but I'm pretty sure you do. So
I don't.
yeah.
I don't. I don't.
Am I
I'm
completely off?
glancing over the lyrics. I don't see it in there. Maybe you're right. I'll take your word for it. I don't
Okay.
necessarily
Okay.
think so. Um,
Yeah,
I
ladies and gentlemen, I introduced the selfish machine. Not
oh,
machine, but
okay, okay.
yeah, it's in there. It's in there.
All right,
Briefly.
all right. For the Sky and the Sea, this is back on What They Know. I thought guitar went way too hard. I would listen to literally just a solo of it. I'm adding this to my playlist. I thought it was a good way to end, Rashab. It
Yeah, that's
wasn't
fair.
crazy. It wasn't crazy in the way I like Pierce songs,
Uh-huh.
but it went in and it kind of did what it needed to do, and then right at the end it washed away. So maybe not the most perfect like end of an album, but I saw what they were doing there, and then when it got like really quiet at the end, they knew they were putting that in the last track. At least maybe on the reissue that the actual their last the 13th what would have been the 13th track is even better ender or something. But right. I thought at the end of the day it did what it did and it worked, and I will be listening to The Sky Under the Sea again.
Okay. Yep.
But yeah, I think it's safe to say we can go into just our overall thoughts.
Rishabh. Yeah, I'd like you to start, Mateo, if you can. I mean, I think you have more interesting thoughts. Yeah.
I can. This is something I've been wanting to say the whole time, because I think this is definitely the dysfunction that me and you get of why I like it and you don't. I think the perfect way to sum it up is, if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. Like, come on. Pierce the Veil and other bands, I think, just like raised a generation of teens. You had to be there, dude. Not just physically, but mentally. I don't know. It's just like, not to get cheesy about it, but Pierce the Veil means a lot to me, and not just like this album, but like a lot of the other songs too. Overall, though, I do need to be fair. And this is something we've already talked about. A good amount of their hit songs really blend in with each other and don't have a ton of individuality. Unless you listen to them a lot, like I do, and then I'm like, okay, I know this is Caraphernalia. I know this is The Boy Who Can Fly. I know this is Bulletproof Love. Like I know just by when it starts, I'm like, okay, here's what it is. But to stick on the whole album, it definitely had a couple weaker tracks, but I didn't think anything was unlistenable. That's really my thoughts. Overall, I think it's a good album, and I think it stands the test of time, but I don't think this is an album you need to listen to the whole thing through. Like, I don't think you get anything by listening to every single track. I think you can cherry pick and hit like the high notes of it, even if, like you'd say, they sound the same, and I'd even agree. But I do think you should still listen to their hits, even if they do sound the same. Because I think it's just a good album, and to really represent that kind of era in time too. So overall, though, out of 10, I give this an 8.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fair. I think. Yeah, I mean, anything else you wanted to add, Mateo?
I really was just gonna add that, like, it really, the reason it's an 8, and maybe I was kind of veering almost towards 9, but it's just a couple of those tracks as I wouldn't listen to them all the time, honestly, and I don't think because if you ask me if it's individually rank the songs, honestly, the ones I really like are 9s or 10s. It just kind of gets down with a lot of them bleed together and it loses the individuality, and then I don't think it's super necessary as a whole album, if that makes sense. So I hear it all in one sitting or as a whole with the story. I think it's a breakup album, but that doesn't necessarily mean they all go together. I know that's going against the blending in all together, but it makes sense in my mind that it's not like they're adding on to each other. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. What were
I mean, I feel like I've given my thoughts throughout the entire review, so it won't take too long. But I mean, I personally, I did not grow up listening to this music, but I was aware of it, and I have a nostalgia for it, almost in the sense. Like, I recognize that it was definitely a product of the time when it was around, right? I think 2007 to 2010, this music was everywhere. Like, even if you did not grow up listening to it, you could not escape this entire subgenre, its entire aesthetic, and in some ways, that has influenced all of us, myself included. So I completely appreciate everything that the Pierce the Veil is doing musically. I totally get their aesthetic. I just think musically, I don't feel like engaged with it as much, but I respect it in a sense. I totally appreciate the space that they're working in, and I totally understand it. And I do think that this music I do enjoy in the right atmosphere or context, Mateo. Like I think, given the right air of nostalgia and maybe, a certain vibe, I think, especially if you think about like emo rock music, I think if the vibe was right, I would say I would really enjoy having this on. But it's something that I would enjoy having on rather than something I'd actively listen to. And that's
Okay.
kind of my take on the album. Is just I would not revisit this album myself to like listen to music personally. But if it were on and we were
You
at
wouldn't
like
ask for
a
it to be turned off. Is that what
yeah,
you're
if we were at
saying?
like a what yeah, kind of. Well, actually the way I put it is I wouldn't turn it on myself, but if we were at like a Y2K party or if we were at literally at Hot
Uh-huh.
Topic, like, it would fit. And I would appreciate it there. It,
Okay.
it kind of exists in its time and space for me. So uh, I'm gonna go with I was gonna go with 5. I think that's too harsh. I'm gonna go with 6. I think I appreciate the sound, even if I don't find it truly compelling. That's kind of my one
Okay.
sentence review.
I don't hate that you gave it a 6. Honestly, from
Yeah,
what you were saying, and especially your kind of impassiveness about it,
yeah,
I thought
yeah.
you were gonna give it a worse rating, but I can
No,
respect it.
no,
I think I can respect because I do know you,
yeah.
and I don't know if you'd agree with me saying that this was a curveball at all or not. I just really I had never heard you just thinking about it, ever listen to this type of music at
Yeah,
all, and I
yeah.
can't picture you listening to it either. I
No,
can only imagine what
yeah.
your face was looking like right when we were listening to this right before. You know?
No, I think you knew. I think you knew that. I think you kind of even subconsciously probably knew. I think you knew that I don't listen to it, but that hopefully you kind of knew that I won't hate it because I think you know that I appreciate this kind of music and I appreciate the aesthetic that goes with it and everything. But
Yeah.
I think curveball in a sense and also not. I mean, I think
Okay.
I'm glad we reviewed it because I think that's what this podcast was for.
Yeah, yeah. I will say, don't take this in a bad way or not, but I just didn't. I I wasn't expecting you like not to hate it or to hate it,
Yeah, right.
but like I didn't honestly. You in my mind are just so far removed from that emo space
Yeah,
that I just maybe I thought you would have hated. I didn't necessarily think you were gonna like respect or love it,
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
I definitely thought there was a possibility. Honestly, you maybe could hate it. I just
yeah.
had
I mean,
I had no basis for your thoughts on
yeah, I get it.
like
I
the
get it.
selfish
Yeah,
machines. So
yeah. That's
that's
fair.
kind of why I
That's
picked it
fair.
too.
Yeah,
It's just interesting to get your thoughts on it. Something we
yeah,
never really
that's
talked
fair.
about.
Yep.
But yep. Unless you have anything else to say, Rashab, I think this was Selfish Machines. This was our
Mhm.
review of it. Anything else to say before we get
No,
to the last
nothing to
part?
add. I think we can move on to our last part.
Yeah, our last part. As this was my choice, now it's Rashab's turn to let me know and all you listeners, his next album that we will be listening to and reviewing on the next episode. Rashab, take it away.
Yep. So this time I just wanted to pick an album. I don't know. I was perusing through what I would want to pick, and I decided to go with a pick that's very lighthearted, very easy listen, very vintage, and just kind of a breezy album, almost like a very sweet and breezy album. And so I'm going with 1966. If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears by the Mamas and the Papas. Classic kind of 60s album. Also happens to have what may be my favorite song of all time, possibly. Okay, it's a big classic. You probably know which one it is. But this is a very lighthearted listen. It might be our shortest album to date, Mateo. So I think this will be a
Okay.
good time.
This is definitely in the realm of stuff I honestly would expect you to kind of pick after we've like listened to
Yeah,
like Beach Boys and stuff like that. But not to
yeah.
get into because it is the next episode. But is this the album that has California Dreamin' on it?
Let me just say this, Mateo. It may have what might be my favorite song of all time. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
And that song is a classic that everybody knows. So
Okay. I think
our
that
listeners are
leaves us
doing the math.
excited. I think we can do the math.
Yes.
Yes. But all right, at least it's the end. Excited for our next episode. Obviously we're doing weekly, right?
Yeah, obviously. And I just want to take a moment and just say, Mateo, 15 albums, man. I'm
I
thinking
know.
back to like 4 years ago when we started this wonderful journey called Aux Fiends, and the entire idea behind this was to, and I'm sounding like this is like our last episode, but 15 episodes is a big deal. I think it's crazy to think about the fact that, the entire purpose of this podcast was for, me and Mateo to, first of all, just bring our taste to one another. I think, that's the whole idea behind the podcast is we have diverging taste. And
Yeah.
also just broaden our own musical horizons along the way. And just to think that, we committed to listening to 15 different albums across. I mean, if we've even had an album that's not in the English language, and
Yeah.
also the Maria stuff that was not in English. So we've crossed across languages, we've crossed across time periods. I think we've
Borders,
had
genres.
genres. I mean,
I
I think
know.
we've had 15 very good, very strong, and very different kind of albums,
Yeah.
and I think it's cool to think that we committed and actually did that. And not only did we listen to 15, we got a chance to talk about them. So I'm really happy and grateful that we got to do that. Even if this is our last episode, which I'm assuming and hoping it's not, I think
Whoa.
nice to earmark this moment. It's just
I think I'm glad you do mention that. I don't think this will be our last episode. I do.
yeah.
Maybe I don't mention it enough. I do enjoy making these, Rishabh.
Yeah.
And
No,
to highlight
wow, okay,
again of
good.
what you've been saying, like 15 albums. That's not every
crazy.
album is an hour long, but that's like basically 15 hours of listening to music. That's more than 15 hours of just us talking. So thank you, listeners. That's like 30 hours of listening. If a listener is doing the entire homework of listening to the album and then us.
Absolutely.
So all it is
which we know you guys all are because you're all committed listeners.
Yes.
So
yeah,
we know you're listening to each and every track of each and every album and then listening to the podcast. So
yeah, so you guys
keep
definitely
on doing
all
that,
are.
everybody. Keep on
doing
doing
it.
that.
Keep doing it. Keep doing it.
All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Good stuff.
All right. And thank you, Craig, as always. Just needed to put that in there.
Thank you, Craig, as always. Thank you, Craig, for 15 episodes.
Of course. See you on the
All right,
next
thanks,
15.
everyone. Thanks for listening.